I assume it's working. Press the button. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Real quick, just one announcement that I wanted to make is there is a party, social event this evening at the House of Balls. It's about a half-mile walk from here. If you're interested in walking over with other people from the camp, we can meet up at the bottom of the stairs by the registration desk at like 5:30 or so. There'll be at least one person there that knows where they're going, and we'll make it up. And that is my only announcement at the moment. So, as I said this morning, I was part of the programming committee for the camp, and one of the things that we had to do was figure out what a theme for the camp could be. And we settled on the idea of accessibility. Our camp has a history of doing a lot of presentation and talking about usability, and we felt like accessibility was a really nice extension of that topic. Make it a little bit different, but still in the same vein. It was also something that came up a lot when we were talking to people at the university and in the community that were planning to attend the camp. What were they interested in learning more about? And so as a committee, we went out and started to try to find people that might be interested and willing to come and talk to us about accessibility. And pretty much every time we looked, or everywhere we looked, Helena's name kept popping up. And so we decided, well, we should probably talk to her and see if she's interested in coming and presenting at our camp. So Helena's going to give us a presentation that's kind of about seeing things through other people's eyes. And since we all know that I like really awkward group activities, we're going to start by introducing Helena with an activity. I'd like everybody to close your eyes for a second. Now, imagine it's the year 2287, and you've just woken up inside of a vault, Vault 111. You're buried underneath post-apocalyptic Boston. You've been asleep for about 200 years. You turn to your right, and you see your friendly Australian cattle dog, Dogmeat. I like to imagine that this is what the world looks like to Helena. I know that she's a very avid gamer, and so I imagine that when she wakes up in the morning, it's probably something like that. Helena Zubkow is a front-end developer at Lullabot. She's from Orlando, Florida. She graduated from St. Petersburg with a magna cum laude, which I had to look up on Google. I was like, what does that mean? Apparently it means she's really passionate and really smart, which I already knew, but there's a Latin word for this. So I was like, that's cool. She's an avid gamer. She's really into dinosaurs and paleontology. I've seen her speak about that before, and it was super exciting because I wasn't actually interested, and then she spoke about it, and I was really interested. She's also an advocate for people with disabilities and other challenges that make it harder for them to have access to things online. And she's really passionate about that topic. So she's going to share with us today some of her experiences with that and the experiences of other people. So you guys please welcome Helena.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Joe. That was pretty accurate, all of that. Yes, what Joe didn't share is that when Fallout 4 came out, I actually used a week of PTO, so that I had nothing else to do except for play Fallout. And Fallout 3, I timed my wisdom teeth too, because I needed a good solid week excuse. But as much as I'd love to sit up here and talk to y'all about video games for an hour, which I totally could, but we're not gonna, yes, video game buff. I like this.
Nice.
Yes. Okay. Instead, we'll talk about accessibility, because that's the other thing that I really love. And I spent about a month putting this presentation together, interviewing people, and it is called In Their Own Words. So, I'm Helena. I'm a front-end developer at Lullabot, and I specialize in making the web awesome for everybody. And a lot of you have probably heard the name Lullabot before, but I'll shamelessly plug us really quick. We are an interactive strategy, design, and development company. And we create delightful experiences using Drupal and open source technologies. So what is web accessibility? I know that it's the theme this year, which is super exciting because it's finally getting some traction that it really deserves. But not everybody has heard of web accessibility before, so just to go over it quickly. Because, hey, that's how I got into it. I was at a conference and this guy stood up and he was talking about how he's a web developer, and he always puts a lot of thought into it because his mom is blind, and he doesn't want to build anything that she can't see. And I was like, oh my god, I've never thought of accessibility before. That's probably really important. So I got excited about it and started learning about it. And I'm really hoping that I can kind of recruit a few of you today to also be as excited about it as I am. So what web accessibility is, at the heart of it, it's pretty simple. I explained it to a client once who wasn't quite sure what I was talking about, and I said, it's like the wheelchair ramp at a store, but for websites. And there's a lot of different kinds of users that benefit from web accessibility. A lot of the time we go right to blind people, but yeah, blind people, but also we've got our motor impaired people, our people with vestibular issues, the deaf of hard of hearing community, people with seizure disorders, and people with cognitive differences. All of these people need a little bit of accommodation to make websites work for them. And it's pretty easy to do once you know what to do, but it's important to include everybody. And it's also good for everybody else, because good accessibility usually means that you're following best practices and that your other users are also going to have a great experience while you're making it welcoming for people with disabilities. So there's a myth floating around about web accessibility that you're working for an edge case. And this is very much a myth. When you think about it, we've got 19.8 million people living in the state of New York, just altogether people. You've got 38.3 million disabled people in the US, or severely disabled people in the United States. So we've got 18.55 million more disabled people in the United States than there are people living in the entire state of New York. So when you're thinking about an edge case, ask yourself, would we launch if this wouldn't work in New York? Of course not. No client would go for that. So, we should think about that when we're building our sites, that, you might be excluding someone. To put it into different words, there are more than twice as many people with disabilities in the United States as the entire population of Australia. We've got 24 million people in Australia and 56.7 million disabled people. Not severely disabled, that's all disabled people put together. So that's the difference between the two slides. But that's a huge amount of people to think about. So let's move on. I think we've all bought something online that we probably could have just driven down to the store to get in a few minutes. Just hop in the car. But ew, who wants to spend 20 minutes going to the store if you can buy it online and have it delivered right to your door, right? Like Amazon, it's dangerous. My fiance, he has a watch that has Amazon on it, and I'm like, I cannot have that, because every time I went to the bathroom, I would spend $30. That's too dangerous for me. So if you're anything like me, this picture of someone typing a credit card into a computer might really sum up a good portion of your purchases. Except, I memorized those numbers long ago. Anyway. But let's imagine for a second that you're blind and you need to buy something, but the accessibility on the site that you need to buy it from is broken. You'll have to go to the store. The site's broken for you. But instead of like hopping into your car on a whim, you're going to have to navigate public transit blind, or get a ride from a friend, or call a ride-sharing service. Let's call it Schmoober. And if they'll pick you up, if you have a guide dog, they might not. So when you're taking a ride-sharing service, it's going to cost you money. Then once you get to the store, you'll have to ask an associate or your friend for a hand finding the item, since you can't see the shelves. And although they're working on a really cool Iron Man glove for that, but that's a story for another time. You'll probably pay a little more for the item too, since the best deals are probably found online, which costs you money. And then you'll need to use public transit or your friend or Schmoober again to get home, which will cost you money. So you end up paying a tax for being disabled, and that's really uncool that it's more expensive to be disabled, because it's obnoxious. But most blind people are pros at being blind, and you're fine shopping, but a quick errand is more work and more expense when you have a disability. So it's good to take into account, be nice. If you're quadriplegic and you need to go to the store now, you might need to call paratransit and wait for the bus to come get you, unless you live within wheeling distance from the store. But if you don't, you're likely waiting for a pickup time in an unreasonably long time frame, because paratransit's like, yeah, we'll be there anytime between noon and 7 p.m., so we'll get there when we get there. So it's kind of like waiting for the cable guy to pick up what you need to buy. So one of the things that Kathleen Downs, who I spoke to over at the blog, The Squeaky Wheelchair, which I highly recommend, she's awesome and she's really funny, she pointed out that spontaneity is often a luxury for the able-bodied. In her words, if there's one thing I could say to summarize what makes my life unique from that of the average 22-year-old, it would be, damn, this existence gig takes a lot of planning. And then she went on to say, spontaneity is like that distant relative that I've seen in photo albums and heard a few stories about, but I've never actually met. I know he exists and that others have met him, but he's just an idea, so I smile and say, he sounds like a lovely guy. Then I go back to figuring out what time someone can help me bathe next Friday. If that cute cafe I wanted to try can accommodate a wheelchair. If I can get a ride to work, to school, or to a friend's house. Normally, the only spontaneous thing I expect is the spontaneous combustion of my ancient paratransit bus. I'm used to some serious planning. Long ago, I accepted that spontaneity and I would, for the most part, be strangers. Being able to run out to the store and be done with your errand in 20 minutes is very much an able-bodied privilege. One quick errand might eat up a lot of your day if you have a disability, if you can get to the store at all. On the whole, people who have the most to gain from the convenience of the internet are often disabled people. So it's totally upside down that we're leaving them out of the things that we're building. It's important to keep in mind as a developer that saving yourself 30 keystrokes might change someone else's plans for the entire day. So when we talk about accessibility, it's important to keep in mind why we're doing what we're doing. I know a lot of you work in higher ed and things like that, and you're looking at the 508 checklist. But when you're looking at those checkboxes, it's important to understand why we're checking those boxes. Otherwise, we kind of end up with useless accessibility. So we have the core principles, and it's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And these aren't hard and fast rules. They're more about understanding why we're doing the accessibility that we're doing. So first we have perceivable. Pretty simple. Perceivable means that the user should somehow be able to perceive your content. It needs to get from the computer into their head via screen reader, screen, something. And then we have operable. Your user should be able to operate your website. They should be able to click around, get through the navigation, purchase something. And then we have understandable. Users with cognitive differences sometimes might need a little more time. That's why you don't want a slider that zooms past really fast with text on it, assuming that everyone can read that in 10 seconds. Because some people can't read that in 10 seconds. So it's great to give the user the opportunity to explore your content at their own pace. And then robust. Assistive technology is constantly coming out with new stuff. So it's important with your site to make sure that it's robust enough to stand up to what people are currently doing, things that are reasonably outdated, and anticipated tech standards. Because new screen reader, not cheap. Zoom text costs $800. So people can't just buy whatever the new cutting edge thing is all the time unless they happen to be rich. So it's good to be considerate of that. Yes, that's true. Yeah. So how do people with disabilities use the internet? I'll give you a little bit of background before I go into the next chunk of this. But a lot of people with disabilities use assistive technology. And that comes in a lot of different forms depending on what you need help with. So blind people use an assortment of screen readers to read the screen allowed to them. And a mouse isn't super handy if you can't see what you're clicking. So a lot of blind people rely really heavily on keyboard navigation to be able to get around the web. That means that they need everything on a website to be able to be reached using only the keyboard. If you can't reach something on the site via keyboard only, neither can some of your users. So any of you that have a Mac, I see lots of glowing apples in the room, you have a free screen reader on your computer. And granted, it has a relatively small market share among actual blind users, but on a Mac you can press Command F5, and that'll bring up VoiceOver, and you can use the tab and enter to navigate a site. And it's not going to give you the exact experience of being a blind user, because honestly they're more proficient than you. They've been blind and you haven't. But it's a good starting place if you're trying to put yourself in your user's shoes. It's a good spot to start with a low learning curve to learn about the visionless web. If you have a Windows computer and you have Windows 10 or later, WindowEyes is available to you free of charge. And that's really gaining on JAWS for the biggest piece of the market share amongst the fully blind users because it's free, which is great. And JAWS is very expensive.
What is JAWS?
JAWS, it's a screen reading program. And it's a really cool screen reading program, but it's pricey.
It stands for Java Accessible Speech.
Thank you. So it's really interesting to think about using the web in the way that we haven't had to use it before or think about it before, right? But putting yourself in the user's shoes can be an intriguing challenge when users are so diverse. What works for one person may not work for someone else, and there really is no perfect accessibility. It would be awesome if there was, but there is no accessibility that's going to be perfect for everybody, so we just kind of do the best we can. But in all honesty, you know, sometimes people say like, oh, this is a pain, I don't want to do one more thing. But we owe our users a great debt. The internet is made for users. Without users, there is no internet. And without internet, a lot of us are not paying rent this month. So we need our users. When I first got interested in accessibility, I did a lot of reading and learning from other developers like me who wanted to make the web a better place. Mike invited me out to Canada, and I learned from a bunch of the guys up there at Ottawa. But there's great people that you can learn from. And I dug into books and websites, and I learned everything I could, and I learned all the nuts and bolts of it, and I learned all the rules of it, and then I got excited. And I took everything I learned, and I went all around saying, I have to tell everyone about this. It's so important. Oh my God. And anyone that works at Lullabot can vouch that I pretty much never shut up about it at any point. I'm obnoxious, but for a good cause. So I went pretty much anywhere where someone would let me hold a microphone for about an hour. And I told everyone why it's the right thing to do and how it makes perfect financial business sense to be doing this and what we need to be doing. And I kept learning and I kept talking. But I missed something. In fact, I missed the most important thing. I was so busy talking and learning that I wasn't listening. Nothing about us without us is one of the core mantras of the disability community for a reason. Without the perspectives of actual users who use assistive technology every day, anything we build is based on outside speculation rather than lived experience. So when I'm up here advocating for accessibility, it's not my job as an able person to tell you, here's some of the things that I think users with disabilities are going to need. When someone asks, how do you know what users with disabilities need? The best answer I can give is, because they told me. So I started shaking the bushes looking for people who really do use the internet in an alternative way. And at first I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to find enough people with disabilities that would be open to letting me interview them to get a good population sample of perspectives. This was not the case. As it turns out, people want to be heard, especially when you're trying to bring light to their perspective on an issue that really matters to them. Volunteers for this rolled in faster than I could interview them. It was awesome. I interviewed blind people and low vision people and deaf people and hard of hearing people and people with motor disabilities and people with intellectual disabilities. And let me tell you, this was the most fun I've ever had as a web accessibility specialist. This was a blast for me. Everyone was so cool and so open and honest and just filled with information that they were really eager to share. So, you know what I learned? As a sighted, hearing, physically able user, I knew jack shit about real life accessibility. I knew like all the textbook stuff, like everything that was like, this is what users will officially need. But the things that I learned that the people I interviewed came to me with weren't in that book. I've learned more about accessibility in a month by just talking to ordinary people about their needs than I've learned in years of accessibility book learning. So, as much as I want to thank you for lending me your ears and your minds for an hour today, I can't tell you as much as our users can. This isn't about me. It's not about us as developers. This is about our users with disabilities. So I'm going to tell you what they told me they need in their own words. This is Sarah. Sarah was a blast to interview. She's so cool. Sorry, thirsty. Okay. And she's an adult disability advocate. She's an artist, she's a speaker, she's a model, she's a dancer, she's a busy girl, she's an author. She's always doing something else. She's incredible. And she works for Rug Global, and she works for Nordstrom. And she's really proud to have Down syndrome. And this is a little snippet from one of her conversations on Axe Chat, which if you're not following on Twitter, Axe Chat, guys, it is so cool. They have all these different conversations about accessibility every week, and you can get in on it, ask questions. It's a fantastic thing to be part of. But Sarah wrote, "Why would you want to hide? Let's all be us. I strive to be the best me every day. No shame. flaws are beautiful and make us unique. So definitely be part of AxChat, because a lot of people have a lot of good things to say there. So here's what Sarah had to say. Sarah said, websites confuse me if they have pop-up windows or take my focus away. I also get confused with italics or fancy fonts. It helps me to have clear language, clean design, and good white space, which is great because that's what a lot of us are doing on the web now anyway. That's in vogue. So, I mean, make your site look fashionable and clean and be good for users. She also said, I like lots of colors and graphics, audio and video. The more interactive a website is, the more I like it, as long as it's easy to navigate and easy to interact. So, good UI. All right, sure. And she said, I do better when the website has a consistent look and feel so I can learn the layout quickly. All of this is really great feedback from Sarah because it kind of goes back into what we were talking about, where if you adhere to best practices, a lot of the time your sites are just naturally accessible anyway. Just don't break them pretty much and do weird stuff, and a lot of the time everything falls into place. So the next person I had a chat with was Casey Matthews, and Casey is the funniest guy. I was like cracking up for our whole phone call, which we ended up chatting for like 3 hours. He's awesome. But he's an access technology specialist at Lighthouse, which is a blindness organization in Orlando. And he's blind himself. And what he does is he teaches classes on assistive technology to students living with vision loss who want to get computer skills to remain savvy or return to the workforce or just to be able to use a computer. And he's also a hardcore gamer, so he and I had a lot to talk about. But the first thing he talked to me about was crappy accessibility. And he said, there's a company called something, and they have steadfastly remained non-accessible. And it's a really nice service because they take you from Miami to Orlando, and there's plenty of space for service dogs, but making a reservation online is a major pain in the butt. To add insult to injury, if you call to make a reservation over the phone and they try to get you to use the website, there's a fee for booking over the phone. And when you explain that the website is not accessible, they just have an attitude like, well, that's not our problem, and they just don't care. They're a small company, and I guess they just don't feel like it's a big enough deal. Well, we just won't use you guys. That's kind of a shame, you know? So this kind of goes back into what we were talking about, where a lot of the time when you have a disability, there's an entrance fee to do things that able-bodied people do and don't have to pay that entrance fee for. So it's important that we're fair to people when we're building what we build. He also went on to say, for a couple of weeks, a popular ride-sharing app, let's call them Schmoober, updated something in the app, and it was a lot harder to use than it had to be. It was preventing some users from being able to make trips using assistive technology and get their rides. Some people could get somebody to assist them in the app when they needed it, but some people said, well, I guess I won't be going anywhere today. Casey also does a bit of web development, so that's really cool, and I asked him about being a developer and being blind at the same time, and what he had to say was, Drupal 8 is awesome! I do websites volunteering for people, and I've got to tell you, they did a fantastic job making it accessible. They've got hotkeys that get you into different tabs in the menus and drop-down menus. Everything works with screen readers. Everything is HTML5. ARIA speaks when it's appropriate. It's just an awesome example of what we can do. I've personally been waiting for Drupal 8 for a long time because I knew they were going to have some of these accessibility fixes. I'm so glad it's finally here. And guys, I'll tell you, that was totally unsolicited. He didn't even know I was interviewing him for a Drupal camp. So for all of you that have worked on Drupal 8's accessibility, you nailed it. Can we give you guys a round of applause? So we continued chatting, and Casey brought a perspective to me that I hadn't actually considered, and he said that a lot of blind people who are blind were not always blind. A lot of people become blind throughout their life. And what he said was, if you're blind, especially if you're new to the whole blindness world, it's hard enough to learn to use a screen reader. Then if you get to an inaccessible website with all of these workarounds that you need to know, it's hard enough when someone has come from a sighted world where they're used to easily getting what they wanted. When a site isn't accessible, it's really a frustrating experience. People end up throwing up their hands and saying, I'll just get someone else to do it for me. It's really sad to see that happen. And then we went on to talk about web forms, because he said that's a really big pitfall where things get inaccessible quickly. And he said, I know a lot of times I still see a lot of this, and this is backtracking. This is part of him working with students, because he's an access technology teacher. He's working with students all the time, and he's bringing up the things that he sees happen to his students over and over. So he said, I know a lot of the time I see a lot of this stuff where you'll go through a form and stuff won't be edited and labels won't be labeled correctly, and that's probably the biggest thing I see. It's not as easy as tab first name. Instead you get tab edit. Well, what does that mean? Sometimes you'll be filling out a form and you'll get to address, street name, and then you tab and you hear just edit. You can figure out that they want the second part of the address, but I see a lot of people get confused by that. I've seen very few forms where that's actually done well. Another thing that really gets people is phone number boxes. Some sites want the area code, some want it all split together, some of it want it all in different boxes, and it's really confusing for people. Sometimes you'll get there and you'll be typing away and you don't realize this box only wants 3 digits instead of 10. That's confusing, and I see that a lot. It's the same thing with Social Security boxes. So when we are labeling our phone number boxes and our social boxes, it's important to specify how many numbers each box takes, not just phone number, because that can be really confusing for people. And then since we were talking about web forms, the conversation, yeah, I hear the collective groan. CAPTCHAs, they're awful. So what he said was, CAPTCHAs suck. I've got to say, there are better options out there. For a blind person to have to rely on a graphic to get things done, it's really, really, really frustrating. You'll go filling out a form, and you'll go through the form and fill the whole thing out, and then it says, okay, to verify you're a human, you must fill out this CAPTCHA, which is both insulting and aggravating. So if you don't have someone to read it for you, or if there's an audio option but you can't figure out how to get to the button for it, or you can get into it but you can't figure out how to get out, it's really frustrating. Some people try to use the audio option and the audio isn't clear, so I've seen trouble with that too. But I've seen forms that handle it really well, so it is doable. Google has this new thing where you just check a box. That's great. People who are new to using a screen reader can get so frustrated after going through so much work to fill out a form and that not being able to submit it that they won't even want to use technology anymore. They decide it's more trouble than it's worth after having frustrating experience after frustrating experience, and they totally give up on the computer. It makes me sad to see that. Guys, if we're breaking people's spirits because we're not building our forms right, we're doing something seriously wrong. It's not that much work to put in your labels and to not use an obnoxious CAPTCHA. We can build a honeypot. That's easy. I think there's even a module for it. Yep. So, yeah. So definitely no CAPTCHAs. Let's do it right and make it a great experience. So then we got into talking about alternative text. And Casey said, Facebook has actually started doing auto-captioning of graphics, which is, this is me now, but this is something I've seen a lot of my friends who are really into accessibility doing on Facebook, is when they post a photo, they'll post a little description about it. Anyway, back to Casey. Facebook has actually started doing auto-captioning of graphics. When somebody posts an image, they try to provide instantaneous alt text to the image. It's pretty crude text that it comes back with, like 2 people in a park. So it's not a lot of description, but it's better than nothing. A blind person, instead of just ignoring someone's graphic post, they can have some idea of what it is. They can engage in that dialogue a little bit more. Twitter recently, right after that, included spacing for people to include their own alt text for graphics. They don't have to, but they can include alt text. I wish they would have made it a requirement, but little things like that crop up show that people are paying attention to accessibility. These things do make a big difference for people. Oh, guys, I can think of a framework that recently required alt text for images. Yeah, something Drupal, something like that. So, here's my next slide. Oh my God, it's blank. No, okay, so let's talk about alternative text. If you're blind and there isn't any, this is what an image looks like to you online. So what are we looking at here? We don't know. Could be anything. When things are blank, we usually skip them, right? How about now? 2 zebras stand side by side, looking at the camera in the savanna's dry grass. The background is dotted with trees. There's still no picture, but we have like a pretty good idea now of what is going on in that image. So it's a lot better. And here are our zebras. Not bad, right? There are 2 zebras standing side by side looking at the camera in the savannah's dry grass, and the background is dotted with trees. Now, there is a thing that happens online sometimes, and we use alternative text badly. And instead of using it to describe an image, we use it to stuff marketing keywords in. So to a blind person, your zebras might look like this. Low-priced African nature excursions, cheap discount coupon, zebras, lions, rhinos, safe. Please don't do that. Even if your SEO guy says it's a really, really good idea, please don't do that. And because I took this from Wikimedia Commons, thanks for the zebra, Sajad Fazal. The last thing Casey and I talked about were restaurant menus. And, you know, I hadn't really considered this because I had, when I was a waitress, a couple, and they were blind, and they would come in all the time, and they would just ask, like, hey, do you have steak? Do you have chicken? And I would just tell them what we had, and they'd order it. But, you know, not everybody's the same. Not everybody wants to do that. So what Casey said was, this is a big, big deal. Of course, a blind person can't just grab the menu and find out what's on it. A lot of the time, we'll get the menu from the website. Some restaurants won't update the menu for 3 or 4 years, or they'll update the menu by just putting a graphic or a PDF up there. When you do that, you're leaving some people out. I wish all menus had nice headings and were HTML based. It would be a dream come true. Oh yeah, and we talked about video games. That happened too. So what Casey had to say was, I really have to give Microsoft some credit because they're in the early stages of making their Xbox consoles accessible. Oh my god, you guys, that's so cool. They made a really good point in one of their accessibility talks where they said most of the time we think about screen reader technology for productivity, but we want you to be able to get in there and get to your games. A lot of the time, I think big companies just don't see the benefit or the point. They don't think of blind people wanting to have fun and play games, and there's a huge blindness community out there that loves to play games. But unfortunately, most of the games that we have access to are 15 or 20 years old. There's not really a big attempt to make a big mainstream game that all of your friends are playing that's popular accessible. I used to have vision, never great, but some, and I used to play video games. I miss those days. Obviously, something like Halo or Call of Duty would be way more difficult than others, but it would be really cool if something like that happened. And yeah, you know, with things like this, a lot of the time we think, like, oh, well, I don't think because I'm an accessibility freak, but a lot of people do think, like I had a client where I was like pushing for accessibility on their videos, and the client said to me, well, blind people don't watch TV. And I'm like, yes, they do. It's like a radio show. And they're like, and he was like, oh. And I was like, yeah, and if you put in more dialogue so people know what's going on without seeing the screen, it would be a lot better. And he was like, oh, yeah, we could do that. So, bing, let's hope that happened. Okay, so the next guy I spoke to was Casey's coworker, Mike Fox, and he was really awesome. Mike is a software developer who's visually impaired. He's not blind, but he has very little vision. And he recently presented at this year's Assistive Technology Industry Association conference on his innovations to streamline digital workflows for Lighthouse call center agents who are visually impaired. So to sum up, he is a visually impaired developer who makes software for visually impaired people. Cool. And a tongue twister. Fun. So, on being visually impaired. And Mike let me grab some photos of him, and you can see his screen, how much it's zoomed. So he can see, but like not a lot. And he said, I have enough vision that I would still consider myself a visual user. However, I think I'm about as non-visual as a visual user can be. For example, I know how to find the X button and click on it, but I'm way more efficient just pressing Alt F4. I use keyboard navigation constantly, and I really only use the mouse when I have to. For me personally, I'd say the biggest challenge all comes down to keyboard navigation, because like I said, I use the keyboard for everything. So problems with things like tab order, keyboard shortcuts, focus, etc. are a bit of a pain. Nothing I can't handle, but I just wish they were done better than most sites do them. And then I asked him, well, Mike, what would you say to a room full of developers? And he said, don't get me started. But I did get him started. I pushed him for it. So again, he said, if you choose to use a content management system, I recommend Drupal. It's accessible out of the box, right down to the administrative UI. Again, no coaching. I totally didn't tell him to say that. So good job, guys. He also went on to say, if you choose to use a JavaScript framework, I recommend Dojo. It was developed with accessibility in mind, and its documentation even lists all of the navigation keys and known issues with different assistive technology. It comes with some fantastic accessible UI widgets out of the box, and it's easy to create your own if you have to. And then he said, if you choose to use pure JavaScript, I strongly recommend contacting technology at lighthouseworks.org. And who am I to deny him a shameless plug? So, our next user spotlight is this girl I talked to, Adriana Malozzi, and it was super nice of her to give me some of her time because she is a very busy woman. She is on everything. She's a 36-year-old with quadriplegia cerebral palsy, and she's been living independently in Boston, Massachusetts for the last 18 years. She serves on the board of directors for the Commonwealth Community Care and on the regional board of Easter Seals, Massachusetts. She also serves on just about everything else, but my slide is small, but suffice it to say she's a very busy lady. What she told me was that using a keyboard with a mouth stick or a head pointer is the lowest tech way of accessing a computer and more prevalent than the more sophisticated and expensive options. For this reason, it is imperative that websites can easily be navigated with just a keyboard, the ability to tab between links, menu options, etc. Pretty much what we got into, well, I think that's my next slide. Okay, so blind people aren't the only people who rely heavily on the keyboard to get around online. We kind of have a theme forming here. People with motor disabilities like quadriplegics really need keyboard accessibility too. The fine motor skills that are required to point and click with a mouse can be really difficult or impossible for them. Some people with motor disabilities might be able to manage a keyboard with their fingers if they're not that heavily impacted, but others might need to use a mouse stick or another form of assistive technology to be able to navigate. This is why it's especially important to be considerate of how many tabs are on your page to get to a link. These never-ending pages that are stuffed with content are a nightmare for people who are using a mouse stick because they have to click, 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 click. It's a huge pain. So try to keep a limit on how much you're making people tab to get to things, and use your skip links so that they don't have to tab through your navigation on every single page they land on. So put a little skip link before the navigation starts that they can click to say, okay, skip, and that'll just take them to the main content so they don't have to hear your navigation again. That can make your site a lot more enjoyable for keyboard and mouse stick users. So then Adriana said, assistive technology used by those with mobility impairments for accessing computers is basically a replacement of conventional methods, being the keyboard and the mouse, trackpad, trackball. So in theory, if a site is completely browsable by just using the keys on a keyboard in conjunction with the accessibility features of the operating system, mouse keys, sticky keys, then it's accessible using any assistive technology. And the reason why she pointed this out is because I had a misconception about how people with severe motor challenges use the internet. I kind of thought everybody had like the really cool system that like Stephen Hawking has, and no, that's like $1 million. Most people have a mouse stick. That's the most affordable thing, and financial considerations are real. So unless you're like independently wealthy or you have the best insurance company ever, you're probably using something more low tech than that. So again, keyboard accessibility is really important there. The next person I spoke to was Michelle, and she was really a delight. We're keeping in touch. She's a blast. She's from the northeast of England, and she's been severely deaf since she was born, and she's seen how technology has changed and enhanced her life by way of access. But she's also seen that access be prevented when digital media is used without subtitles. She's passionate about provision of subtitles for the 11 million British people with some form of a hearing loss, and more around the world. And then I'm pairing these two because a lot of what they said was very much in stream with each other, and I was like, let's make this a conversation. So I also talked to Ellie Parfit. Ellie's 19, and she's a profoundly deaf blogger and a passionate deaf activist. She's a brand ambassador and writer for Phonak Hearing Like Me community blog, and she chronicles her daily adventures on her blog, Day in the Life of a Deafie. And that's her with her hearing aids. I don't know if you can tell that from there, but she has them in the little shape of a heart. So what Michelle had to say was any website that uses visual presentation to get their points across or demonstrate facts needs subtitles. The BBC are a prime example. They use videos instead of text to present the news. Without subtitles, I cannot access that piece of news at all. It used to just be 1 or 2 items. Now they continually use this method to get their facts across. Guys, people need the news. That's crazy important to be skipping. So, I mean, we should never skip captions or subtitles on anything, but especially the news. Then Ellie said, one thing I'm really passionate about is captioning or subtitles. When there aren't subtitles on videos, especially on websites, I can't follow them because I'm a lip reader and I can't hear what they're talking about. And she threw in some critique. She said, remember, live streaming captions do not work and they are not accurate, like YouTube's automatic captions. If subtitles aren't an option, provide a written transcript. Perhaps consider sign language videos too. And I don't know if you guys have had any experience with this, but maybe you're like at the gym and they have everything on mute and the news has those automatic captions. They're just like garbled nonsense. It's not ready yet. If one of y'all could make like a module or something that could work for that, I don't know, but it's not ready yet. So Michelle said the other thing that I would want from websites, and this is dependent on the service being provided, is a chat online facility in place of or as well as a phone helpline. This has proved invaluable to me from companies where I can resolve issues independently without relying on a third party to make a phone call. And Ellie said, it really bugs me when sites don't provide email addresses. Not all deaf people can use the phone, and email or text is often the best communication method for us. It's always a struggle trying to get in contact with some companies. I end up having to use Twitter to ask for an email. So when we are putting our websites together and we're tempted to just put a phone number, it is good to give people a way to contact you via text, whether it be email or a live chat. And on that topic, backing up, while I was talking to Casey, he mentioned live chats as well. He said that there are some chat clients that are much better than others for being accessible for the blind. Some of them don't tell you when the other person has answered, and you kind of have to like leave the window and then come back and try to figure out if they've answered you or not. So what was it? It was Live Now? Live Person. He said Live Person was really good for blindness accessibility. So, thirsty, sorry. But really, guys, as web developers, we're craftsmen. That's what we do. I mean, that's kind of silly to say like artisan websites, but we're craftsmen, and craftsmen take pride in their work. We don't hang our hats on sewing sloppy stitches. Think about how careful we are about structuring our CSS partials and making everything so clean with our comments. And we want to do quality work because it's important. Our goal is to build something beautiful and functional and elegant. And if we have millions of people who can't use what we have built, it doesn't matter how great anything else about it is. Take 10 seconds to put that accessible text in. Not because you have to. Not because you'll get in trouble, not because ADA compliance says you have to, or because the ticket you're working on has a requirement that says you have to. Do it because you give a darn about the other human being on the receiving end of your work, who will otherwise have to spend their afternoon going to the store to purchase something that they could have bought online in 10 seconds if you would have typed in 45 more characters to build that button right. Put the captions on your videos. Not because the ADA says you should, but because Frank should get to watch Game of Thrones at the same time as all of his friends without having it spoiled for him on Facebook by the time the captions come out. Let your work shine. Take pride in it. Be hungry to learn, hungry to perfect your craft, hungry to include more people in whatever you're building today. Helen Keller once said, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. I truly believe in all of us. An inclusive web is not a pipe dream. It's something that can be real if we all pitch in. Let's work together and make the web awesome for everyone. Thanks for listening. And you can say hi to me on Twitter at Miss Helena Sue. I'm nice, I won't bite, and I will answer accessibility questions. Hi.
Hi. I loved your presentation. That was really nice.
Thank you.
I did think that the text in your text balloons is too small.
I agree.
You know, if I had to just read that, I would ask. And the other thing on captioning, I don't know about anyone else, but I personally hate it when you're trying to watch a foreign language film and you're looking at the text below and they have it just transposed over top of the film, and so the film background changes and maybe the text is white, maybe it's black, and then there's areas when the color changes,
Yeah.
you can't even read it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it needs to be a separate bar, and I don't know if there's a way of doing that. That would be my preference, not have it cover up the picture, but just have it underneath somehow, or maybe a text alongside or something, because the way it is now is really kind of ridiculous.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And there are some streaming web services that let you do that. Like I think Amazon will give you like a background with like a pretty low opacity to go behind the text, because I always watch with captions on just because I prefer that. And I agree, it is better when there's something behind it to give it. Yeah. And I tell my clients that on websites too. Like people love to put text over images on websites, and I'm like, ooh, can we put like a background on that text? Because there's no way, especially in Drupal where things are dynamic, there's no way to anticipate what image is going to be behind that and if contrast is going to make it or not. So that's a really good point. And yeah, it happens more places than that, and we need to pay attention to it. Hi.
How well do contrasting drop shadows work in lieu of a solid background? Or
not great. If you give them a good spread and it's a really dark color, it's still not great. Like, it's better than nothing if the client just won't let you have anything else. But if you can get away with putting like a low opacity color behind it or a completely solid color behind it, you're going to do way better as far as accessibility goes. Hi.
So what do you use or do to the site to make sure that it's accessible?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I love the Wave tool. It's a fantastic tool. It's completely free. They have a toolbar, and they'll flag all the things that are even like maybe wrong or, this is great. And you can click on the flags and it will tell you what to do to fix it. So it's a fantastic tool. And then there's also Color Oracle, which is good if you're a designer in the design process. Let me just pull up something really quick. Yeah. Oh, darn it. Let me see if I can scooch this over to y'all. Hey, there it is. Sorry, I forgot I turned mirroring off. Okay. Oh, okay, I guess not. But there's this other thing, and it's called Color Oracle, and it's great for designers to check their comps, because the best time to start accessibility is before you start building anything, because you don't want to backtrack. It's a lot more work to retrofit something for accessibility than it is to build it accessibly in the first place. So if you run your comps through Color Oracle, that will let you see your comps as different kinds of colorblind. So you can make sure that nothing is on top of each other where it shouldn't be, where if you have all your rods and cones, it looks fine, but if you're missing any, it's going to be impossible to see. Wave Tool will also give you flags on contrast issues. So if you've got, designers love subtlety now. That's like the hot thing is, oh, it's so subtle. Well, it's also so invisible for people with low vision, so stop it. So you don't want like medium gray text on a gray background because it's not great for contrast. But yeah, Color Oracle is also free, and I also have nothing to do with them. Hi.
I've been doing accessible websites for a long time, and I just want to give everybody one thing that works every time. It's not just about people who are blind or low vision. 1 in every 4, 1 in every 5 Americans will be over 65 very soon. It's a huge, huge marketplace.
Yes.
This isn't just a small little marketplace. This is huge. And many of them are computer users. So it's a real easy argument if you throw that out there. Grab some demographics from your region and show them how many people are going to be over 65. I'm wearing my cheaters today. I don't know how many of you guys are too. But, they make your website accessible. You make it easier and smoother for those over 65 folks, whatever their issue is, to use your site. You're going to increase your market share.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you threw that in. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
You might need to talk about
yes, please. Hi.
Will there ever be
be a point where the government steps in?
Gosh, I hope so.
And starts regulating accessibility on the web and making it mandatory?
A lot of governments have. In Europe, that's becoming pretty much the norm. Canada, it's the law. It was maybe supposed to happen this year, and then it didn't.
More delays.
Yeah, more delays. Basically, they said we spent so much time gathering data on this that now our data is obsolete and we need to start gathering data again. So hopefully in the next year or two this will come through. I have my fingers and toes crossed because it really needs to be mandated. Hi.
To build on that, in Michigan, for grants, education grants, they have said that all of our products, if they're funded by state, they have to be ADA compliant.
Yes. And that is a thing in a lot of the U.S. is if you're receiving federal funding, you need to be ADA compliant. There's kind of some shady gray area. If like you're a private university, but you have federal funding, you're being sued right now, but we don't know for sure what that's going to come out and be. But if you're a federally funded program, you need to be accessible. Mark.
One thing they did say, like, it stinks that it got delayed, the regulations. But they did say, they made a point of saying, like, we're delaying the exact rules, but your website needs to be accessible. I mean, websites of private companies, not just people getting federal funding, are getting sued.
Oh, yeah.
Your website isn't accessible because if you're doing something that's a public accommodation, it needs to be accessible whether there's a regulation specifically talking about it or not.
Especially in California, or if you have clients in California. California has some laws that other states don't, and they can really hit you hard. Target just got their butt sued off, and they ended up having to pay out something like $11 million because their site wasn't accessible. And they're a private company, so with how easy it is to implement accessibility versus being sued for $11 million, it really is a better safe than sorry scenario.
Doesn't accessibility also have something to do with load time? My sister-in-law is always complaining about how she goes to a news site and there's always these pop-ups and sidebars full of movies, ads. And she says, it took me, it takes 5 minutes to be able to see the content. So I don't know if there's any regulations about that, but it's just awful, especially since she has a little slower internet connection. Is anybody addressing this?
I don't know. I know a clean site will load faster than a sloppy site, absolutely. So, and usually when you're building an accessible site, you're adhering to best practices. But my mom has the same issue. She installs all of those like happy fun toolbars, and I'm like, Mom, don't install that. They're not your friends. But she'll call me, well, it's fine because it was Jesus' happy fun toolbar. I'm like, no, Jesus didn't sponsor that toolbar. Yeah, that happens to people. Anybody else? No? All right, well, then I'll let you guys go to the next session. Thank you so much.